Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. Here, we aim to bring you the experience, strength, and hope of professionals working on the front lines in the field of food addiction. Our mission is to educate you, the listener, and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a recognized disorder. Here, we discuss all things recovery, exploring the many pathways people take towards abstinence in order to achieve a health-forward lifestyle. We hope to inspire you to thrive rather than just survive. So stay positive, make a change for yourself, and share your journey with others. And hopefully the message will spread.
Are seed oils as bad as sugar? Welcome to the Food Junkies Podcast. My name is Dr. Vera Tarman, and I'm your host today, speaking with Dr. Cate Shanahan, author of Dark Calories, How Vegetable Oils Destroy Our Health and How We Can Get It Back. Dr. Cate Shanahan is a family physician, nutritional consultant, and author who is known for her work on the dangers of industrial seed oils and their biochemical impact on metabolic health. She has designed nutrition programs for NBA teams such as the LA Lakers and Golden State Warriors, and has written books like Deep Nutrition and her latest, Dark Calories, that we would like to showcase here. With her combination of scientific investigation and practical clinical experience, Dr. Shanahan urges both professionals and the public to reevaluate the advantages of fat in our diets alongside understanding how seed oils can have a negative impact on our metabolic function and mental health. So let's explore how this is and how seed oils, unlike healthy fats, can actually contribute to addiction. So welcome, Cate Shanahan.
Thank you so much, Vera. I'm delighted to meet you and talk with you and hopefully help your audience.
Thank you. Can you tell us what got you interested in nutrition? Because as we know, family docs don't learn about nutrition. So what got you interested in nutrition and then particularly seed oils?
So it was actually a sugar addiction because I was a sugar addict. I didn't really think I was, of course. I didn't even know there was such a thing. This was in the 80s and 90s and stuff. We didn't talk about sugar addiction. We just said, I have a sweet tooth.
Yes.
And so because of what I was eating, the way I was eating, I actually ended up getting really sick. And it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because I had gone to medical school because I was really interested in root causes. And I left medical school very disappointed and somewhat disillusioned and just determined to slog through it anyhow, because I never learned those root causes. I just learned to categorize disease and how to test and what drugs to use. And we did learn about exercise. We learned about calories, but not the deep kind of stuff that I really felt was meaningful. So I really felt like I couldn't meaningfully help my patients. And that all changed when I got sick enough that I just considered doing something about my sweet tooth and learning a little bit more about alternative ways of healing. And that opened the door that became my life's mission now, which is understanding really very different than where I started, which was just understanding what could be making me sick. It became really redefining nutrition science. I've written 5 books now, and they all take large leaps towards that lofty sounding, almost ridiculously lofty sounding goal. But I had to redefine nutrition science as I had been taught. It made no sense. And so what I've done since is I've done a lot of work in the area of seed oils, but that's just one subcategory of the kinds of foods that are harming us, which are the processed foods, right? So seed oils we all know junk food is bad, right? So I've studied really what makes junk food bad. And seed oils are the main thing that makes junk food bad. And the other 2 are refined sugars and refined flours, which really are the same category. They're both pretty much equally addicting, as I'm sure you've probably dealt with. Although sweetness maybe has the edge over things like bread and pasta and stuff like that. I did not have addictions to those things. I was just a sugarholic. But the third thing that makes junk food junk is refined proteins. And because refined protein powders are in health foods, what we think are health foods, that almost makes them this entire undiscussed category that I do discuss in my book, Dark Calories. And so nobody has talked about any of this in a systematic way in terms of what really is processed food. And that's why I say I've had to redefine nutrition science, because if we all know junk food is bad, we all say not to eat processed food, but we've never defined it systematically. And that is a major failing, because if people don't know what it is, then how are they possibly going to stop eating it?
So that's really interesting. You have categorized these three areas, and we at Food Junkies definitely were on top of the sugar and carbohydrates. And today we're talking about the seed oils, and now you're also saying there's the refined proteins. That's an area I think that we should explore as well. But let's stay with the seed oils.
Yeah, so seed oils are the worst of the worst, and understanding this would have been impossible had I not studied biochemistry at Cornell with the intention of doing something about the fact that plastics are not biodegradable. What does that have to do with seed oils or food or nutrition? It shouldn't have anything. It shouldn't have anything to do with it. But because we eat seed oils, it's everything. Unless we understand what seed oils have in common with plastic polymers, we can't really understand how bad they are to us and what they have in common to our bodies, how they affect our bodies. And so what I realized was that their biochemistry is extraordinarily similar to the polymers that we make plastics out of. Okay. And plastic polymers, okay, so you guys probably aren't plastic polymer scientists. So let me tell you where you have experience with this. Have you ever used epoxy glue or put polyurethane on your floor or varnish on your furniture? You know how you just paint this liquid on and over time it magically hardens. What's happening during that magical hardening process is the individual molecules are aligning with each other and bonding to each other due to the chemistry that makes oxygen. The oxygen kind of makes all these things bond together. So oxygen in the air, oxygen not in the bottle, but oxygen in the air, right? So that's why they don't harden until they're exposed to air. Seed oils have a similar biochemistry. Because they are polyunsaturated, that just refers to the fact that they have at least two double bonds. All plastic polymers have at least two double bonds in a certain kind of location near each other, very close to each other. That makes them especially reactive with oxygen. And so it's this commonality with plastic that I like immediately, I recognized it once I looked at what I was actually eating in these supposedly heart-healthy vegetable oils, like corn oil and soy oil and canola oil. Supposedly heart healthy. And I had never looked at the chemistry until I went down this rabbit hole of what should I be eating. And I found out I had to figure out what I was eating first. Like I had never even occurred to me to look at the chemistry of the kinds of oils that I had learned were supposedly the healthy kinds not because I learned anything much about them, like corn oil, soy oil, canola. They're plant-based oils. So doctors always are skewed towards the plant-based in our entire education. And I just assumed they were like olive oil, right? And olive oil was something that seemed to me to be good and natural, just inherently. I never questioned where they actually came from or what they were actually like. And the medical system had me brainwashed to think that they were good because of what they didn't have, which was saturated fat and cholesterol, right? So things like butter, those are supposed to be bad for us. That's what the medical system learns. Like we do learn things about nutrition. Problem is, what we learn is not true. It's not based in chemistry.
To go back to your double bond and how that similarity with plastic, were you going to suggest then that nature of seed oils, that's what renders the seed oil bad for us? Because it's basically like eating plastic.
It is very similar. Now, it's not like we turn our bodies into plastic, but so that's where the analogy ends. But in terms of the rapidity at which they react with oxygen and then they deteriorate into molecules that are not nutrition or not nutrients, right? So they start out as natural fats. They're called, the specific fatty acids have names, and people might have heard of these names. They're omega-6 and omega-3 categories. So anybody who's eating fish oil has heard of omega-3. So these are in that category, right? They're polyunsaturated. And the specific molecules in seeds are called linoleic acid and linolenic acid. And yes, they sound the same and you don't need to memorize that. It doesn't really matter unless you're really a chemistry buff or you're a dietitian. Please listen. But yeah, so these linoleic acid and linolenic acid, both the omega-3 and the omega-6, will react with oxygen in the same way that plastic polymer materials will react. And for the most part, it doesn't cause polymerization, but it does cause polymerization. And so when we are eating foods fried in seed oils, we're partly eating polymers that are, fortunately, the polymers don't get absorbed. So they don't get into our body. They don't do that much harm. They're probably not good for our microbiome. But the reactivity and the reactions that happen, they can polymerize our cell membranes.
So these polymers are the essence of what's bad in seed oils?
That's part of it. That's only part of it. But yeah, the concept of reaction with oxygen is really the essence of what's bad. The reactivity, the fact that like these double bonds in these fatty acids are potentially dangerous. Our body needs these fatty acids because their double bonds can be useful. That's why nature makes them in the first place. That's why seeds need them. They can be useful. That reactivity has a benefit when you're a seed trying to germinate when it gets warm, for example. That's why, like the northern seas of Canada, you guys have your canola oil actually has 3 double bonds because you're so much colder than us. You need like it's a little bit like antifreeze, and it helps the seeds germinate when in much colder temperatures, like just above freezing. Soy, on the other hand, only has 2 double bonds. But those double bonds are bad in the amount that we consume today and when they have been processed and refined in the hateful 8 seed oil. So to step back even further, I think I need to focus on what I mean when I say seed oil. So no one was talking about these things until I started talking about the chemistry and the oxidation. This was 20 years ago. I'm not talking about seed oils. I used to call them vegetable oils, but it's not that all vegetable oils are bad. It's not that all seed oils are bad. We really need to be clear that it's just a few of these oils, these plant-based oils. And I call that grouping, because there's 8 of them, I call them the hateful 8. And so I'll just list them out again real quick. So it's corn, canola, cottonseed, soy, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, grapeseed. These are bad because they have these double bonds and they are processed in a way that is completely unnatural. And the healthy seed oils are not processed like this. So sesame seed oil is not a hateful 8.
Well, I was just going to ask you, give me an example of a couple of healthy seed oils.
Right. So the seed oils that are edible when they are first extracted are good. So what I'm implying here is that the hateful 8, they are inedible when first extracted. You cannot eat the crude canola or soy or corn oil or any of those. You cannot eat them. They are caustic, they reek, they are unhealthy. It's not recommended that you eat them. They're just considered inedible. And in the edible oil industry, don't like see this as a problem. Like, why are we eating food that is not safe to eat until it goes through a giant factory and then it becomes like at least edible, right? It doesn't make us vomit. It doesn't make us sick right away. But so what's the difference between that and sesame seed? When you extract sesame seed oil from sesame seeds, the way that they do it is totally different. It's the traditional methods, right? These are the healthy seed oils are things that have flavor. Sesame seed oil is delicious. And back in the day, we didn't eat stuff that didn't taste good. But now we eat things that taste like nothing. What does canola oil taste like to you?
Are there other good seed oils?
Yeah. So anything that comes from a seed that has a taste, what's a good oil? So think about this. So what are we talking about? Seed oils are like peanut oil or flaxseed oil, pumpkin seed oil, right? Any oil that has a taste is really edible, right? So olive oil is edible. And actually we can understand the difference between these edible and inedible seed oils if we talk about olive oil, because you know how olive oil has grades, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So there's like the top grade of olive oil. That's the first cold press, and they don't really have to refine it. It's green. They filter it so that there's no seed chunks and stuff like that in there. And it's delicious. It's the most expensive. That's really the kind of oil humanity used to eat. Always, no matter whether you're rich or poor, because you were making it yourself if you were poor. That's the only difference. And you didn't want to filter it. And any oil that remained behind, that was called pomace oil or lampinet oil. And it was harder to get it out, and it didn't taste as good. And they used it for lamps and lubrication and other purposes that were not nutritive. So peanut oil is one of these, is interesting because it comes in both forms. You can get virgin peanut oil, which they just call like unrefined peanut oil, and it has this strong peanut flavor. That's the peanut oil that we're supposed to eat. But you can also buy refined peanut oil and not know any better, and it has less flavor, and we really shouldn't eat that because it also has no nutrition, and it contains a lot of polyunsaturates and can be harmful when consumed, although it's not as harmful as the hateful eight. That's why peanut oil isn't one of my hateful eight, even when it's refined.
Hateful eight. How did that happen? How did we get inedible products, which should be lamp oil or soap or something, into our food? How did that happen?
We can thank the marketing geniuses at Procter & Gamble for that. So Procter & Gamble used to use cottonseed oil for candles and soap. And then at the turn of the 19th century and the early 1900s, they learned how to hydrogenate it into a solid that looked like lard. So they started selling it as Crisco and, Cottolene. I'm sorry, Cottolene. And then later companies made Crisco. And this was solid vegetable shortening, which is basically still used to be on the market until the trans fat ban. But that was until the 1940s. And then along in the 1940s, they wanted to sell the liquid. So they hired a marketing genius, a total, like the father of, I write about this in Dark Calories. There was a propagandist who they hired. And the propagandist was a psychological mastermind. And he managed to involve the American Heart Association in a way that benefited them to say that soy oil was healthy. And this is, I tell the story of this. It's a fascinating historical story of deception and arrogance and the pursuit of fame over any kind of concern for public health by the American Heart Association, which is still today the most influential medical organization on the planet. The American Heart Association, they run the nutrition conversation. So if they say canola oil is healthy, that's what doctors and dietitians and nutritionists believe, you see. So it's really important to understand that these guys were only saying what they were saying because they were being manipulated actually by a marketing genius who wanted to use them as basically tools, useful idiots, to sell Procter & Gamble's soy oil. And then it became a huge industry where it wasn't just Procter & Gamble that was selling stuff. And there were no regulations. This was the 1940s. So remember, at the turn of the century, you could buy, maybe you don't know this, but you could buy milk that was made to taste less sour. Like it was old, soured, spoiled milk. They didn't have refrigeration back then. So you could put like things like borax in it to make it taste less disgusting. Although the borax had extreme toxicity. So that was legal. So things were legal back then that aren't now. And essentially these oils have just they were never tested as safe. Their health effects were never like systematically tested because they were never put through the kind of the rigorous testing processes and approval processes of a novel substance, because they had already been used for decades, although almost nobody was eating them, right? The amount of liquid oil that was consumed 100 years ago is like less than a thousandth when it comes to focusing on soy oil specifically, less than a thousandth of what we consume today. So it was available, but nobody really ate it. And nevertheless, it was grandfathered in and assumed safe.
Is margarine an example of one of these seed oils was promoted?
Margarine is a product made from seed oil, but it's not as toxic as seed oils. Yeah, and margarine contains something called trans fats. So those are no longer in the food supply. I don't know if you knew that, but there's been a ban enacted on trans fats that are completely synthetic molecules, don't exist in nature, and wisely we decided to ban those. But because the seed oil toxins are present only in very low levels when you buy the seed oil itself, medical science doesn't consider that important because they don't know, they have no clue about the reactions with oxygen that I was talking about. And those reactions with oxygen, they create new toxins from scratch. So basically, when you buy a bottle of canola oil, you are buying a reaction chamber. And when you unscrew that cap, the reactions accelerate and you start forming toxins. And when you cook with them, that makes the toxins form at meaningful levels to your health, where we can really be hurting our health. And if they're more than a few weeks old, the open bottles contain meaningful levels of toxins, but we cannot taste that.
You mentioned trans fats. And just because we know that's bad, we know that it's not supposed to be in our food supply. What are trans fats in relation to the fats that we're talking about? The seed oils or even the healthy fats?
Okay, so they're related, definitely, because trans fats are made out of seed oils. And here's the thing. Trans fats are less reactive with oxygen. They were invented because the seed oils themselves back in the 1900s reacted so fast that the chemists just hadn't figured out how to refine them so that they could be edible. The only way to make these liquid seed oils edible would be to put them through this process that they call hardening and solidify them. And the chemistry of that is you take one of the double bonds and you add a hydrogen to it. So it's called hydrogenation. And that erases one of the double bonds. And now it has only one double bond. But generally, the double bond is in an unnatural configuration or a less natural configuration. And that is called trans, that particular configuration. It's not something you need to really visualize or understand or even really know about. It's just that the key thing here is that the only reason we ever ate trans fat is because it is less toxic than the seed oils were. Those things could not be rendered edible back in the 1900s when we invented these trans fats. If you had a bottle of cottonseed oil back then, it would reek. They didn't know how to refine it. So nobody would eat it. And so what they did, instead of refining it, because that hadn't been invented yet, that process, they did something else, which turned it solid. And that's called hydrogenation. And that's where trans fats came from.
We've stopped the trans fat phenomenon, and now we're focusing on seed oils and refining them so that you're saying when you buy the seed oil, it's fairly okay. But the moment you open it, you've lost the safety profile if there was one.
So the refining process makes it so that the bottle, when you open it, is relatively similar to how it was when it left the factory. If it wasn't refined, when you open the bottle, it would smell horrible and it would continue. The reactions would be occurring, right? There would be so much stuff in there that gets removed during the refining. So what needs to get removed during the refining is almost all of the antioxidants, almost all of the minerals, and a lot of the vitamin E. All that has to be removed because it's reactive stuff. And if you didn't remove it, then the bottle will go from smelling vile in one way to smelling vile in several ways. So they remove all that stuff. Now, that's great for shelf life as long as the bottle's closed. But once you open the bottle and start cooking with it, then these naked polyunsaturated fats will start reacting with oxygen. There's no antioxidants in there. And by the way, there's no nutrition in it either. So you really shouldn't eat it. It's just empty calories. It is absurd that I always get a little verklempt here when I'm talking about this because it's so absurd that dietitians don't know this. And dietitians are out there they think they're debunking me because they don't understand what I'm saying. They don't listen. They don't take the time to listen. Like hopefully your listeners will rewind this and hear it again so they can start to get how important this is. But the dietitians don't know any of this. And they refuse to learn, most of them. Some of them are learning, and those I am grateful for.
Does that mean that a bottle of Crisco that you open today, if it's been in the fridge or on your counter in 6 months, is even far more toxic as the longer it's there?
Yeah, so Crisco is generally like the hardened shortening, right? It's not liquid. It's probably meant to say something like Mazola or Wesson oil or any vegetable oil.
Any vegetable oil, the longer you have, the worse it is. Okay.
Exactly.
So
and don't cook with it.
No, don't cook with it. Okay. Well, what happens? So you're saying there's an oxidization process. What's happening to the body? I'm guessing it's a general inflammatory response. You elaborate a little bit. How does this lead to metabolic disease and then especially to mental health?
Yeah, so this is a really important part to understand that I've spent really my life kind of putting these pieces together, and I've written about this in all of my books. And the short answer is it depletes our bodies of antioxidants and it destroys our mitochondria. And those two things cause inflammation, degeneration, accelerated aging, and everything bad. Cancer, Parkinson's, dementia. And they have metabolic effects that we'll probably get to those. But the separate, because of how they damage the mitochondria, they have metabolic effects, meaning they make us overeat. They make us crave sugar. They turn us into diabetics. They change the chemistry of our body. Fundamentally, this is people who live on vegetable oil, and we are living on them if we don't know what they are. Because my calculations show that we're getting somewhere around 20 to 30%. The average American is getting 20 to 30% of their calories from them unless they're specifically avoiding them or making all of their food at home for themselves from scratch.
Not going to restaurants.
There's very few, because the whole Robert F. Kennedy and the Make America Healthy Again, and him like with his little memes about talking about making tallow fries great again, or something. There are more restaurants now that are frying their fries in tallow, beef tallow. That's what McDonald's used to do until the American Heart Association made them change. And there's more restaurants now popping up in all major cities that are frying in tallow and avoiding the seed oils and saying things like seed oil free and choosing healthier vegetable oils like olive or avocado or coconut or even peanut. But sorry, see how I go off on tangents. I'm so sorry. There's just so much to this. You were asking what do they do to the body, right?
Yeah. And that's probably too big a question. Could you talk about things like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's? How can they contribute? We know that sugar can contribute because of the insulin effect in the brain. But how can seed oils contribute to these neurological psychiatric disorders?
Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are diseases of oxidized protein deposition. Proteins that were part of the functioning cell become oxidized and start to accumulate and cause dysfunction in the cell. So tau protein, the amyloid plaques, those accumulate in Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And then in Parkinson's and all the Parkinsonism type disorders, there's something called alpha-synuclein protein. Those are oxidized protein. Where have you heard me say oxidized before? Oxidation is the reason these oils are toxic. So these oils cause oxidation to occur. And because they react with oxygen, they cause oxidation reactions. That's chemistry. And it is the chemistry of these oils that drives the formation of these oxidized proteins that cause the cell dysfunction.
So that's how that happens. Can you talk about the addiction component? I think you touched on it a few minutes ago, but just elaborate a little bit more. How can seed oils contribute to food addiction? And in fact, would you say that it is more potent than sugar alone, refined sugar, or is it just one of the three?
It is the most potent. It is the worst because seed oils drive us to sugar. Seed oils make us crave sugar or foods that will raise our blood sugar, like the refined carbohydrates. Seed oils drive this addiction, and understanding that is the key to understanding metabolic disease, including insulin resistance. In fact, we have misunderstood largely insulin resistance as a disease of caused by carbohydrates, where the sugar molecules are driving the problem. Sugar is causing too much insulin to be released, and over time that somehow wears out the hormone system, and we lose our sensitivity to insulin. That is not what happens. That is absolutely not what happens. I have a recently published paper in an academic peer-reviewed journal that describes the connection between seed oils and insulin resistance. And the title helps us understand a little bit, because the title is really insulin resistance is exposes what really insulin resistance is. Insulin resistance is a disease of energy production. So I call it the energy model of insulin resistance. And what happens is that insulin resistance, which cannot develop unless we include seed oils, or almost cannot develop. It was very rare before seed oils were in the food supply. Alcoholics could develop insulin resistance. People who are severely protein malnourished could develop insulin resistance. But generally, it was so rare that medical science, it was almost unknown to medical science until seed oils came into the food supply in 1950. It was first described in 1958 in journals that medical doctors now read and textbooks and stuff like that. It was not taught about until 1958. Seed oils came into the food supply about 10 years prior. And it took some time for doctors to recognize what was happening. But so insulin resistance is mostly driven by this process that I've been touching on, oxidation. And it causes something in our body, a very powerful dysfunction called oxidative stress. Like I said, seed oils deplete our antioxidants, right? So that means we can't control oxygen in our body. Oxygen is an energetic molecule. And so that's where the energy connection comes.
And the oxidation that somehow drives insulin.
But it's indirect. So I had to piece all this together. And basically what it does is we're eating so many seed oils now, right? Like the average person, 20 to 30% of their calories is coming from seed oils, which have these fatty acids that did not used to be in our food supply at this concentration. They are now maybe 10 times higher. So our body fat has 10 times more of these highly reactive polyunsaturated linoleic and fatty acids, mostly linoleic and some of the omega-3 linolenic. But our body fat is not supposed to have that recipe. Like the recipe for human body fat has been messed up. We have 10 times more of these polyunsaturates than we are supposed to. And these polyunsaturates are liquidy. And so they're changing the composition of our body fat. Human body fat now looks and behaves different. Surgeons are noticing this. Surgeons are saying that like the fat is just like it falls apart in a way that it didn't used to before. It's more liquidy. It's changing our body fat. And that has profound effects on our ability for our cells to generate energy from it. So when you can't get energy from your body fat, that's where insulin resistance starts. Because what happens is the alternative fuel is sugar. So your body starts putting more sugar in the bloodstream. And so we have more sugar in the bloodstream. And then that triggers an insulin response, triggers the stress hormones, which resist insulin. So if you have high levels of cortisol and adrenaline in your system, then the insulin in your system is resisted. They have opposite effects at the cell. That is the beginning of insulin resistance. And so then how does it drive sugar addiction? That's the next kind of question. Like I was saying, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. There's no simple way to put this in a soundbite. Everybody says, you need to simplify your message. And I'm like, okay, I just reinvented science for it. And now it means put it in a sentence. Okay. I don't think I can do that. I'm sorry. But it's just important to understand that this is what happens. It drives sugar addictions because when our cells can't use body fat for energy, they need more sugar. When your cells need more sugar, your brain says, I need more sugar. Hello?
You're telling me is that for people who are carnivore or keto, who are eating a lot of fat and protein, but still showing some insulin resistance, it could be because they're eating a lot of seed oil fat.
It's definitely because of that. Because the main other reason why you become insulin resistant if you're not an alcoholic is you're not getting enough protein. And on the carnivore diet, you're getting enough protein.
Yeah.
As long as you're not overdoing with alcohol, it's the seed oil. So cut those out. You must cut those out. That is not emphasized enough. I have been disinvited from the low carb USA events because my focus is on exposing how seed oils are unhealthy. And that is not their interest.
No, they're interested.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that? I used to respect those people until they stopped inviting me. And then they told me why. Well, they didn't tell me, but I indirectly heard through other people.
Yeah, because your focus has not been low carb. It's seed oils.
And they want everything to be, that's their brand. So they have to keep with their brand. More important than to help people. I'm sorry, but I don't tolerate that.
Now
and I have to say that's bad.
It seems to me that you could be the missing link here in understanding why it is that some vegan or higher carb people do well if they're doing whole food plant-based, like they're avoiding seed oils. And there they are not having insulin resistance. And that doesn't fit the low carb platform.
You've hit the nail on the head. That is the missing link. This is the missing link. And because we've overlooked this and we don't see it and it's been hidden, that is why I call my book Dark Calories.
Yes.
You touched on it. Exactly. It is the missing link. And also, if you are a physics or a geek or like you're into like the universe, there's this stuff called dark matter, which physicists had to invent this because it explains things that nothing else can explain. Vegetable oils and understanding how they hurt our body explains things that nothing else has explained. So it's so important. It's so important. It shouldn't be dark. We need to shine light on it.
Okay, so you've convinced me that I really have to pay more attention to avoiding seed oils. You do say in your book that you can't just stop, you have to taper down. Can you talk
about Okay, that's just, if you can stop. That's a very important thing you brought up. So a lot of people do assume you have to taper down or they are thinking of other things and they just assume. But seed oils, you can stop. You can stop those. What I said you might need to taper down, I was referring to going cold turkey on a keto diet. If you are type 2 diabetic or you're severely insulin resistant, your body actually needs a certain amount of carbohydrate. And if you don't get any, then it's going to convert the protein into sugar through the process that's called gluconeogenesis, which you may have heard of before. And if you are not getting enough protein either to do that, then your body will start breaking down your muscle, your bone, your You won't be able to make hair, so your hair will fall out. This is why people on Ozempic are losing their hair. They're losing their bone density. They're losing their muscle mass. People on Ozempic are losing weight, but they are burnt. Their body needs sugar. And if they're not getting enough protein or getting enough carbohydrate, then they will break their body down. Anybody will do this. Even people on a carnivore diet, if they're eating a lot of seed oils and just not getting the carbohydrates that their body needs. But not all carbohydrates are created equal. So you can totally cut down on the big bad, what I call the big bad three, right? The refined fats, which are the seed oils, the refined sugars and flours, which are refined sugars and flours, that's the carbohydrate, and then the refined proteins. You can cut those out tomorrow, but your body will still need some carbohydrate. So just get it from things like beans or nut butters or nuts or semi-starchy vegetables like broccoli. And
why can't you just survive on good fats and protein? Like the carnivore diet that does the bacon, butter, beef, and I forget what the fourth one was.
Some people can, but when you are insulin resistant, you're taking a risk here, because when you're insulin resistant, according to my theory, that the energy model that we were talking about, that means your body needs more sugar than normal. And your body does normally need about 30 grams a day. We have a physiologic need for it. And that's why nature created gluconeogenesis.
I got it. But that's why you would taper down. You wouldn't just go.
You don't even need, you can stop the refined sugars and the refined flours, but you would want to have some carbohydrate. And I recommend people who've been doing a lot of carbs, try to keep it under 75 grams, but it should come from whole foods.
Yes.
Like your beans, it could wild rice. I don't really love brown rice. It's really mostly carbohydrate. So beans and wild rice and nut butters are a great source. And anything else you can think of that has carbohydrates that's a vegetable, but it's not a refined flour. Like I will sprout wheat berries and have those. And that's how I get some carbohydrates. If you don't eat any carbohydrates, then your body basically has to waste some of the protein to make sugar, right? Like you're eating animal products.
Yeah.
And you're basically wasting this animal's life. A certain amount of protein that you're eating is a waste and tragic for that animal, because you could have just gotten it from a vegetable. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. And I know the big bad eight, but what about the oils that I can eat? So you had mentioned that olive oil was good and some peanut oil. What about things like avocado oil, hazelnut oil, are all real seeds and they have a taste?
So there's fruit oils and there's nut oils and there's seed oils. And fruit oils are a distinct category. Avocado is a fruit, and they get the oil from the fruit, not from that big fat nut in the avocado. They get it from the fruit. And coconut oil, they get that from the flesh of the coconut. Olive oil, they get that from the olive itself, not the olive pit. And then when we jump over to the nut oils, those are technically seeds, right? So you could just say there's two categories, seed oils and fruit oils. And the answer to all of them is we should only eat the unrefined versions of all of them. Now, I have this middle category because there's so many processed foods now that are made with refined avocado oil or refined olive oil that are better than eating the same processed food with seed oil. So like mayonnaise, right? You can get mayonnaise made with olive oil or mayonnaise made with avocado oil. Chances are it's refined because it has a more neutral flavor, less objectionable to people who are used to Hellmann's and stuff. It's the middle category that I call good but not great, right? Okay, but not great. They're not. So we got the good, which is the unrefined, flavorful stuff. And that includes sesame seed oil and flaxseed oil. But you don't want to cook with those. And I go into all that in my book. And you do need to study this a little bit so you can understand the differences. This is not a 1-point takeaway podcast, right? The 1 point really is read my books, because everyone who actually reads them, almost everyone, so many people are so grateful for the information, and they share it with their friends and family, and they share it with their doctors, and it's creating a lot of change. And we need that. We need that change, because right now our food systems are unhealthy and nobody even understands why. We're just all afraid of everything right now.
What kind of success would you suggest a person might have if they decide tomorrow I'm stop all my seed oils, I'm just going to cook from scratch?
So I have had people tell me that, I got one of my most moving letters was like a 9-page sort of manifesto of somebody who was in jail, unfortunately, and had read my books and done his best to avoid the seed oils in the food. There are some places where it was impossible, but he felt like it changed he was in jail for reasons related to his mental dysfunction. And he felt that avoiding them to the extent that he could dramatically resolve that. And he didn't need psychiatric medication anymore. So it's like nothing will get worse and everything can get better. I had a patient who was 900 pounds and he'd gone on the keto diet and the carnivore diet and all these other diets and was able to, and had bariatric surgery and all this stuff, every drug there is. And he was able to get down to 400 pounds. But not until he got off the seed oils was he able to get under 200 pounds. And by the way, feel a lot better. Like the first thing that you notice from day one is you will have more energy.
From day one, even?
From day one, when you start this, because we're changing a bunch of stuff at once. We're not just avoiding the seed oils. We are also cutting out the refined sugars and flours, right? So we're having eggs for breakfast, or we're having just like regular, anything carnivore, anything keto, just without the seed oils, or even like macrobiotic. You could even be vegan and avoid seed oils, although I don't recommend it because you can't get enough protein. But so macrobiotic, you could have beans for breakfast. If you wanted to be vegan, you could have milk and dairy for breakfast. When you have that, you will be getting foods that sustain your energy for the morning, and you will be avoiding these inflammatory compounds that have been inflaming your gut, and your health begins in your gut, right? That's what we're learning from all of our research into the microbiome. These oils devastate the microbiome. These oils are directly kill bacteria. Then we breed extremely bizarre and unhealthy bacteria in our gut. So we start restoring our gut health too from day one.
And so IBS settles down, like either diarrhea or constipation would settle down.
Yes, hugely. Like everybody has told me that it has either resolved completely or radically improved, because IBS, there's also a huge psychiatric component, and stress will drive it as well.
Say a little bit about your book. I'm assuming that the book, Dark Calories, is everything that we talked about today.
Yes, and it will give you chapter 1 will give you a solid handle on why dietitians don't understand seed oils are toxic, and why your doctor, your cardiologist, your psychiatrist might be telling you that this is all just nonsense or bunk. Because I explain at a very high and friendly level the chemistry that you need to know that doctors don't learn. And then in chapter 2, I explain how this leads to, chapter 2 is called the all-you-can-eat buffet of chronic disease. And so I explain how this starts hurting your health at the cellular level, and then how that translates to all these diseases, all these inflammatory degenerative diseases from A to Z. In chapter 3, I talk about what we talked about, so that you can, the energy model of insulin resistance, so that you can really get a handle on why it's more important to start avoiding seed oils than it is to start with avoiding sugar, although if you can, avoid both. And then in chapter 4, I call that one Fat Bodies, Starving Brains, because I talk about how our brain function is tied to our blood sugar level when we're insulin resistant. And we're in a good mood when our blood sugar's fine, but when our blood sugar starts to drop, that destroys our moods, and it destroys our sociability. We don't want to be with people. We get anxious. We start fights. We start arguments. I had this. I was insulin resistant, and I used to experience this. Like when my blood sugar was low, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I just didn't. I didn't want to be bothered. And I thought that was my personality flaw. So that's just the first 4 chapters. And then there's the history of the intrigue about the public relations firm and how they convinced, like how people, the American Heart Association, bullies at the American Heart Association shut down legitimate scientists who had concerns about these oils. And then I talk about cancer. I talk about the myths of meat causing cancer. I destroy that myth because, by the way, you'll see, they can't make meat cause cancer in animals unless they cook it in margarine or corn oil.
What kind of pushback? You mentioned the low-carb community was unhappy with you. Have you had general acceptance of your message?
The American Heart Association is on my case. They are out trying to censor me, and they, instead of being able to get any publicity around my books, what happens is people read my book and then they twist everything that I said and publish their wrong misinformation in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. These are supposedly respectable journalists. That's how the pushback is. It's not direct because they will lose. If they talk to me directly, they will lose because they're wrong. They don't understand. They either don't understand the science, then I'll educate them, or I'll show them how they're wrong. or they'll show me how I'm wrong. No, that's always possible, right? I could be wrong, but that no one's tried. What they do instead is dirty dealings behind the scenes so that I get disinvited. They don't I'm not allowed to present at Low Carb USA. I'm not invited to KetoCon. So I've been uninvited from those places, which is really ironic because the keto diet nobody cared about the keto diet in 2016. In 2017, Mark Sisson published a book called The Keto Reset, and that went wildly popular. That was the first book where they quoted me and they said, don't eat seed oils. You have to avoid seed oils if you're going to go keto. That's not a coincidence. So it's thanks to me that the keto diet is even working for anybody, for the doctors, because all the keto doctors, I've been on Low Carb MD, I've been on all these low carb podcasts, and yes, they take the advice, but do they give me credit to the extent that they'll make sure that I get invited to conferences they're invited to? No.
But you've explained why keto fails when it does. It's the seed.
Yeah. And they don't seem to care.
What is next for you?
I just started working with one of the top 2% influential scientists in the world named Martin Grutfeld, who I write about in Dark Calories. His work is amazing. He reached out to me and said, hey, thanks for writing about me. I think I can get you appointed as a lecturer at my university, because I told him I need to be in academia, but I've been rejected from academia. That's the pushback I get, is people just deny that I exist. They say, oh, no, that's not true. Can't be true. I don't want to know about it. You don't deserve to be at our university. So he got me appointed. And now we're going to be publishing a bunch of stuff that will fill in some of these gaps and be hopefully undeniable and shake things up even more.
Last question, our signature question, which is, if you could tell a younger version of yourself something about seed oils, what would it be?
Don't eat them. They're what's making you a sugarholic. And so that's what I would tell myself. I would say, just avoid these. Eat healthy fats, butter, olive oil, coconut fat, cocoa butter. The good fats, you won't want it anymore. You'll be able to control yourself. I know that sounds crazy, because right now that chocolate bar in the cupboard is calling your name, but it won't do that once you start avoiding these things for 6 months.
Okay. I'm very encouraged by the fact that you said that you'll notice a change within 1 day. That's excellent.
This is all good news. And I'm so grateful to you for bringing me on, because like I say, people, for one reason or other, people want to shut me down, right? Because they want to sell something.
I actually really thrilled this talk, because you've given me a couple of pieces of the missing puzzles of why things weren't working when they should. Thank you so much for spending this time. Yeah. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. Great conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us this week on Food Junkies Recovery from Food Addiction. Make sure to join our Facebook group, Sugar Free for Life Support Group, I'm Sweet Enough. Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals who offer one-to-one counseling and group coaching through Sweet Sobriety. Please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in today's episode, we'd appreciate you leaving us a review on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps grow our show and allows us to reach others who need to hear this message of recovery. Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies. And as Vera always says, the power is ours.